There's a gay revolution going on, but it is not color-coded. In fact, it is quite the opposite, as across Europe, the L, the G, and the B are flooding en masse, fleeing, in fact, to the far right. In countries like France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, they are attracted to parties with strong anti-immigration rhetoric. Oh boy, I wonder why. We talked about this on length, of course, at last week's Stamford Bridge, and we'll touch upon it more precisely here as well. We even did a video on the LGBT community's response to the recent terror attack in Berlin, with the T and so forth defending the Muslims before their own that were actually killed and injured. And all of this comes down to this still being the single most accurate meme to come out of that particular community, as for a very long time now, the LGB and the G have all been subsumed utterly and completely, their concerns pushed to the side and ignored in the favour of the T and all the letters that follow thereafter, having the entire movement in essence co-opted by political agents. And this is leading to some rather interesting shifts as well in politics, as AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, the far right political party in Germany, has for the first time ever seized the lead in an opinion poll for Berlin. Berlin, of course, is a very progressive city and a liberal stronghold in East Germany, which by and large is an AfD stronghold in fact, because, well, East Germany already experienced communism once and they're not particularly eager to repeat it, with Berlin having been the one standout. But this has been going on for quite some time, in fact. There are articles back to 2015 and even 2024 where people are beginning to detect this shift, starting in the LGBTs and the Bs, not the Ts, of course, because they can now understand that they're under attack from their own. So, what is this all about? Well, obviously, it is about the recent Berlin Pride attack, where a man who had been explicitly brought back to Germany from a prison sentence in the Middle East and then given further trials and hearings in Germany where they found that he was guilty of religious extremism. They had him convicted of it as well. As they say here, in May this year, he was sentenced to 1 year and 10 months in prison for preparing a serious act of violence endangering the state. He was found guilty of that after having been arrested in Germany. So how could he launch an attack upon the Berlin Pride Parade? Well, the decision was deferred for 6 months and he was placed under supervision of a parole officer. Deferred means that even though he was convicted, even though the judge and the court said, yes, no, you are indeed preparing a serious, violent attack, but if you meet with your parole officer for the coming 6 months, we might simply decide to ignore that punishment entirely. And, well, he apparently had no intentions whatsoever to, acquiescing to the court's oh-so-kind and overly generous request. This has become a more and more obvious sign, as we talked about in a previous video, for the LGG and the B community that their supposed allies aren't their allies, as this could only have happened as an explicit, specific result of absurd liberalism, of taking a violent extremist from a prison sentence in the Middle East, bringing him to Germany, finding him guilty of planning a violent attack, and then deciding to not punish him for it. This is a direct result of liberal current day progressive, in fact, progressive is a much better word for it rather than the liberal one here, frankly, progressive ideology, a direct political and now real life consequence of that. Now, this is of course just an opinion poll, and elections in Germany happen every 4 years. The last election, you can see here, that AfD managed to get the second place, the second largest political party in Germany, with 20% of the vote, only being fairly narrowly beaten out by the Christian Democratic Union of Germany, which, by the way, is not a Christian or even particularly democratic union. It's Angela Merkel's old party, so yeah. They are the ones who call themselves centrists, and yet lean far more heavily towards the left than anything else. Despite this, however, AfD has very rarely and barely managed to get any kind of actual electoral power, because all the other political parties have vowed to never work with them, and so simply gang up to overrule them. This, though, leads in interesting directions. So you can see here, the latest opinion polls in 2026, the next election is 2029, mind you, so all of this can turn around, obviously. AfD is doing better than ever, ridiculously so, with massive margins of victory here in virtually every single opinion poll ran. The overwhelming minority find them to not be in a commanding lead at the moment. Because here's the thing, if you refuse to implement the solutions to the obvious and clearly stated political problems of your nation, well, the problem doesn't go away. Nor do the solutions, they only become more extreme, as the problem itself grows larger and more difficult to deal with, requiring in turn a far more strident solution. And this now has also come to the point where they are on the verge of a far more current election, which will happen in September in Saxony-Anhalt. So this is a local state election. Now, last time, the AfD got 20% of the vote with 23 seats. This time, they are trending towards, 41% of the vote. As you can see, the previous winner for the CDU, the Christian Democrats, got 37% of the votes and 40 seats out of 83, meaning that if that opinion poll holds true for AfD, they will for the first time ever, I believe, gain the absolute majority in a German state. And the reason why this is important is because this is the inevitable consequence of simply ignoring and pushing the solution further and further into the future. Eventually, when AfD can find nobody to cooperate with, when they can find nobody to make a compromise with, the only recourse that is left is to simply have absolute power, for people to vote for them till the point where they can simply ignore all of their political opposition. And if the left-wing propaganda about the AfD is correct, you would think that would be something they'd want to avoid by, I don't know, making some concessions, maybe? Perhaps not specifically importing violent terrorists to Germany. Just a thought, but no, that is not the reaction, of course. In fact, the most recent reaction is over 1,000 German lawyers and judges signing a petition to have AfD made illegal in order to protect democracy. Yeah, to protect democracy. There can be no compromise with the progressive bloc here, because if they begin to admit the errors that they have made, they must also admit that they have the blood of their own allies, supposedly so, on their hands, that they are directly responsible for virtually every terrorist attack that's happened in Europe and across the Western world for the last 30 to 40 fucking years. That is not somebody any normal man is ever going to be willing or able to do, because it's going to mean that they have to admit they were wrong, deeply horrifyingly wrong, that they have inflicted serious, potentially irreparable damage to the West as a whole. They have caused unfathomable quantities of suffering to be inflicted upon the population of the nations they were elected to act in the best interest of. Thus, the political parties in opposition to parties like AFD will simply continue to ignore reality. They will refuse to engage with any and all evidence to the contrary. They will look upon the terrorist attack in Berlin and demand you protect the Muslim, as again we already looked at in a previous video. And that is going to have the inevitable consequence of more and more people turning away from them. And as, at the moment, the primary victimized groups as well, gay people, as make no mistake, if the progressives succeed in their plan to flood the Western world with immigrants from third world nations, they're not going to look kindly upon the rights of gays, lesbians, or bisexuals. The majority of the people that are currently being imported view all of these things as mortal sins, punishable by death, or in the best case, a forced transition, as is the example of Iran. So, there is indeed a parasite on the LGBT community. It's been there for quite some time. It has not at any point really attempted to disguise its motivations either from the people that it is feasting upon. And I really do hope it's about time to tear it loose. And there is more and more evidence that that is happening, both politically and as we saw in the previous video about the woke beginning to break away from Islam on the internet as well, with people now being willing to raise their hands and go, hold on, are we simply just lambs for the slaughter? Are we merely just little sheep to be lifted upon the altar of progressivism, to be butchered in unquantifiable numbers? For what? And what are we to gain from this? What right are we going to acquire by flooding our countries with people who hate us? It's a very good question, and one that the LGB should start asking themselves more loudly, more vociferously, and more in public than ever, if you wish to actually retain any of the rights you have fought so hard for. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching. I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.